The 25-26 championship season is well and truly alive, and Oxford United are back, unfortunately for us. We've got a brand new name, brand new faces that you'll see over the course of the campaign. And Connor, I would say a brand new Oxford United, but obviously, same old Oxford losing 1-0 to Portsmouth at the Castad.
Yeah. I don't like how repetitive it's coming, losing to Portsmouth at the Castad, or maybe not even losing, maybe just not having the rub of the green and not performing to the standards that we can do against Portsmouth at the Sam. It's becoming a bit annoying, if I'm honest, Sam.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously this episode of Walking the London Road is going to be mainly dominated by the talk of that Portsmouth game. You're all itching to talk about it. I'm itching to talk about it. And based off some messages that Con and I were exchanging the other day, there might be a bit of disagreement. So let's get into it, shall we? I want to start with the starting 11 that Gary Rowett picked. As you can see, Jamie Cumming started in goal. Greg Lee, Mikhail Helik, Helik Moore and Brodie Spencer started as the back four. Of course, Brodie Spencer making his first competitive bow as an Oxford player. Cameron Brannigan and a rushed into fitness Will Vaulks were drafted in midfield, with Tyler Goodrum and Stan Mills out wide, with a front two, as it appeared, one kind of rotating in and out as the number 10 of Mark Harris and Will Lancashire. Connor, when the team news came out, what did you think of that lineup?
I think the biggest surprise for me, and I think everybody else in OX4, was Greg Lee starting ahead of Jack Curry, because I think that's what every fan, that would have been the most certain one that everybody was expecting, and I'm sure we'll get on to his performance in a bit. Volks definitely was the other big main one. We were all expecting Kurzmacher to start, and then Rowett to come out with a minorish bombshell, I guess, to say that Kurzmacher's injured and will be injured for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I don't think even Will Vaulks was expecting to start this game. And then up top, I mean, Rowett at this a few days before did say that he would see what he can do with two attackers up front. And we'll probably get into how Lancashire and Harris both played off each other. But I think that given that Luke Harris, he's not going to be available for quite a while. I think that might have been worth seeing what they could do here. But I think it was. Do you know what? I think that when the team news came out, Sam, I think that it was just a bit flat. I think the whole atmosphere around it just became a bit, oh, really? Because we've had these signings come in. We haven't really been maybe as busy as we thought that maybe we would be, but we were still expected to see a fair few newer faces, or more than Lancashire and Spencer anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. My big concern when I saw the team sheet was Helik and Moore as a centre half there. Two very similar players, and that's why I think Kieran Brown and Helik work so well together. It's because they are such different centre backs. It was absolutely, there was some excitement, I think, from the people I was speaking to, the fact that it appeared we were starting with a two up top. As you say, in OX4, when it rains, it seems to pour, because Luke Harris is out for a while. Kieran Brown's had a setback. De Kurzmacher is out for 2 weeks. Like you say, Will Vaulks was obviously rushed back into service. And then we also got word that the two men out on loan, Jordan Thornley and Will Goodwin, also picked up knocks. Goodwin looks like for a long time. So what football data have we hacked off that we're getting all these blooming injuries in the space of a very short amount of time? Honestly, it feels like every blooming season we have one of these periods where we get loads of injuries.
I know, yeah. It gives me so much PTSD from from Karl Robinson era, that would just bring in like on paper like a good powerful winger, and then their hamstring would go within a week.
Yeah.
So much PTSD from there. But yeah, you're right. The footballing gods, for some reason, with Oxford and injuries, I don't get it. Either that, or we seem to be going for players and we don't check the injury records. There was a player a couple of years ago, I can't remember off the top of my head who it was. We bought him, and there was some rumours going around that he didn't do a medical, but that's for another podcast.
Yeah, I can't remember who that was. You're right, there was. It seemed like the Karl Robinson era. It was just kind of
Yeah.
like, this lad, he's like championship quality on his day, but he's never on his day because he's always injured. I forgot to mention, obviously, that Shane Porheta faced a very late fitness test, which obviously he didn't end up passing. And one of our new signings, we'll talk about in a little bit, wasn't ready to go either. So absolutely brilliant, marvellous. On the game, so I, I think it's fair to start with the fact that I think before the goal, there wasn't an awful lot to separate the two sides. We looked bright. I thought throughout the game, Brody Spencer was marvellous.
Hmm.
Looked really, really assured. Stan Mills looked like he'd had a kind of a new bit of vigour about him. But apart from that, I thought it was very flat. There was very much, I think, to me at least, you could tell the players are still a week behind on preparations. We talked about a couple of weeks ago because of the Indonesia tour and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think you're right. 1 week at the very least, and excuse me, yeah, 1 week at the very least. And down that right hand side, that was just clearly where our brightest moments and our brightest sparks were. Like, I think that we should treat. It was said on the local media today that we should, if we were treating Stan Mills as a new signing, we'd be very excited. And I think at the start of the season, myself and my old man were saying that we have a feeling that Stan Mills might do something this season, and if he's showing that at the start of the season, that's very good. Same with Brody Spencer, but we only 1 game in, so we can't get that excited based off one performance. Same with bad performances, we can't judge off one bad performance. But you're right, it just felt very flat, and I think that kind of rubbed off on the atmosphere, and the atmosphere in the stands rubbed off on the pitch. There were times during that first opening 20 minutes that was a little bit edgy, especially that I think it was about 5 minutes in, Portsmouth missed the glaring header. About 15 minutes after that, they carved us open like a knife through butter, and Portsmouth should have put that away. So those are a couple wake-up calls. And as you say, it come from our defensive liners, Moore and Helik. They just don't work together as a pair. But no, you're right. And then that goal came, and it was very, very unexpected for Cameron Brannigan to do something like that, not look up and see where the man is or not be aware of his surroundings. However, I think that it is fair that he wasn't given as much stick as maybe other players in the past has been given for playing that kind of pass. But we know what he can do and what he's probably going to do come the next few games. But I think that was just a real setback, especially after the great save that Cumming made and said it's just putting away. It was very unfortunate that it landed on his left foot, and it was a great goal as well, if we're honest. How we managed to get it in that tight spot. But I think that really might have set off others back a fair few once that went in.
Yeah. There definitely was a sense that it felt like Portsmouth had 12 men on the pitch. The way they were pressing, the way they were aggressive out of possession, it's the kind of thing that we expect to see from Oxford United sides. Hasn't necessarily happened under Gary Rowett. I'm not gonna like go off too much, and I'm not gonna lose my head because it is 1 game in.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that first game of the season it leaves you very deflated, and obviously there's been an awful lot on the on Oxford socials from the fan base, kind of concerns being levied obviously about the situation. Obviously, certain players getting being dug out by the fan base. It's the concerning thing from my point of view that I will say is that obviously these first 4 games are all absolutely massive. It was our home form that arguably kept us in the division last year. That's already, the Fortress Cast that has already been breached this season. Our away form was awful last year, and obviously, as we'll talk about a little bit later, we've got a trip to Hull on Sunday, where we were absolutely diabolical last season, and obviously they're very excited about there. the window they've had, and you would have expected, given how they came to season, maybe they'd be around us. But I mean, the next 3 games, obviously Hull, Birmingham, and Coventry, I can't see an awful lot coming from them. I've got to be honest.
I think that I can see why a lot of fans have concerns and trepidations, and a wake-up call. I think some fans have called in just via one game. However, we haven't seen a lot from our new signings yet, and I get that we haven't been able to do that because that there's been injury, and whatever that reason is, whether it was going out for the tour, and that's put us back so many weeks. That may be one factor. It may be, I don't know. It's just me playing devil's advocate here. It may be how hard Rowett's pushing them in pre-season training, because we know how big of a fitness thing is, and being able to go through the championship season is. Some of these players haven't exactly had like a great injury record, I guess. I mean, Will Volks, he's had a pretty good record, and he came here, and of course he gets injured, and it wasn't exactly a very good injury that he's had. Brannigan hasn't exactly had a good injury record. Helik Moore, throughout last season, he also had his big injury. However, going back to your central point, I think that you're right. I think that the next game we have to get 3 points, because Birmingham is I fear for Birmingham, if I'm absolutely honest. I'm sure that you are too, and in the back of my mind, if we have the same back line that we do, and we perform the same way we did at Hull as we did against Portsmouth, that could be an absolute massacre. So hoping by then we get in some reinforcements. But after then, you're absolutely correct. Even looking after these next 3 games, if we're going to extend it to the end of September, we've got Birmingham, we've got Coventry, we've got Leicester, we've got Bristol City. I believe that do we have a Sheffield? No, we don't have a Sheffield United in there, do we? But either way, we have teams that we expect to be up and around the top 6 at upper echelons. So I'm not pressing the panic button just yet. And I know that you're alluding to that you're not really either. Only time that I think that fans will really, really start to panic is if we get nothing from Hull this coming weekend. And if we find out that players are actually worse off in injury than was originally thought, or we pick up anything else.
So just to confirm, it is Sheffield United after Bristol City. So it's, yeah. I mean,
however,
I just want to go on.
Sorry, I was going to say that. Forever trying to be an optimist. The only bit of optimism that we can have is that Portsmouth had a quite similar start to the season. They had injuries and they had a horrific start. They had a horrific start of run of games, but when you counterbalance the squad was one there better than the other. But I would just say, by the way, Sam, that if a big thing that we missed out from the game on Saturday, that is, if Josh Murphy was starting in that Portsmouth squad, I think that it could have been a whole lot worse.
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially, like you say, with Helik and Moore as a back two, I think he would have loved running at those two. Obviously we're going to talk about the transfer business in a second. I do want to go back to the Portsmouth game and kind of link it in, because my biggest concern at the minute, like you say, first game of the season, can't jump to too many conclusions. And obviously we've still got, 2.5, 3 weeks left of the window still. But my concern is that let me bring the Portsmouth stats back up, okay? Because it's this bit down here. Set piece expected goals and our lack of ability to create from open play. An awful lot of opportunities, as you can see, we created, but the overwhelming majority of the 19 efforts we had were from set pieces. And obviously that's a hallmark of Gary Rowett's style. Obviously the long throw has been very, very useful for us. Obviously it's from, I think, a corner kick that Lancashire puts the ball in the back of the net, but is ruled out for a foul. But I I could put up with it towards the back end of a campaign when, we're fighting for survival and all that kind of thing. And, set piece obviously a very useful weapon. But at the start of a campaign to first game be so toothless from open play is a concern. And obviously, again, I'll caveat with obviously, a couple of weeks left to go with the window. Obviously, again, we'll talk about the window in a second and kind of what we need. But for me, that's the glaring thing. And from Rowett's interview he gave after the game, it doesn't sound like this area is necessarily one of massive importance to him.
See, I actually think that there were some improvements in attacking from open play, like we've already mentioned. Stan Mills down the right hand side. I thought that when Dembele came on, I actually thought that he did a bit better than a lot of fans were giving him credit for. Goodwin just wasn't. I'm not sure about you, but I wasn't thoroughly impressed with him during the game. However, a lot of fans were saying it, but I don't think that they were actually believing it when they said that with Rowett, it's not going to be pretty and it's going to be hard to watch and it's going to be infuriating. But does he get results? 99% of the time he does. And it sounds horrible to say to a lot of fans, but I think that, and including you, Sam, I think that this might just be something that we're going to have to suck up. Like, just this horrible way of trying to score goals. If this is all that we can do at the moment, then I guess that's what we're going to have to do. I would put forth that if we had someone like a De Kersmacher in there, or if we had Luke Harris sitting in there, which we'll come on to a second with transfers, if we had an actual number 10 playing the number 10 role and we had De Kersmacher with the way that he can play the balls, the way that he can link from central midfield to 10, then there might be a lot more. The XG from open play and our attacking intent might have looked a lot better than it did on Saturday because we didn't really have much. I mean, we had a striker playing in 10 and we had Goodwin wasn't up to his best. And then I really think what happened with Brannigan putting back. But do you see what I'm trying to say? That these injuries that we had at the end of the day, I think if we had these players, then we might have had a bit more gumption about us going forward.
Yeah. I do get that, and you're right. I also thought Sariki, it was an okay showing from when he came off the bench. Yeah. This is an enormous season for Sariki Dembele. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there is the pressure off him in the sense that he's no longer the club's all-time, record signing, but he's a player with an immense amount of talent. You can see that, but what I want to see from Sariki Dembele is no more of that running into a cul-de-sac, trying to do too much, gets pushed off the ball so easily that we saw so many times last season. Mm-hmm. Like I said, he had an okay game, I thought, against Portsmouth on Saturday, and he looks to have rid challenges a bit better than he has in the past, but there is an awful lot needed, and like we said, the injury issues we've got at the minute. Thankfully, it seems like Stan Mills, there's no injury there, so he is fit. But like we said, Shane Baheta might be a week out. Romane obviously out for a couple of months, and like we said, the new additions haven't exactly kept themselves fully fit either. We're going to go through these one by one, kind of very briefly. Since we spoke, Connor, obviously, 3 new bodies have come in the building. The first is Luke Harris on loan from Fulham. Obviously, spent last season out on loan at Birmingham. Their fans, from what I read after he signed, seem to rate him quite highly, but it seemed to be the system that he was playing in, obviously the sheer bodies and other talent that Birmingham had at their disposal last season, which meant he didn't get as much action as you would have expected out of a League One loan.
Yeah, I did read a bit of that as well, and I think that had an influence on what their opinion was of him, and that they didn't rate him very highly. So whether you take that at face value or not, I think it's unfair personally. However, it's just a great shame that we're not going to be able to see him for quite a while, because I think that if Rowett's taken him, he obviously believes that there's something in there that he can get out of him, and I think that working under Rowett, we would have seen glimpses of why he's on the books of Fulham, and why he was rated so highly at Fulham a few years ago. But it's just such a great shame that yet again we bring in an exciting player who their parent club have a lot of high hopes for, and he's injured. It's just this club, Sam. It's just this club.
Yeah. It's I mean, an interesting note on Luke Harris is, like you said, he was very highly rated in the Fulham ranks. I think he's the was for a either he's still or was for a while there top goal scorer in the youth ranks. But at the same time, I believe it was Liam Rice or Jerome Sale had reported that he's actually out of contract at the end of the campaign. So obviously, it's entirely possible that Fulham halfway through the season will go, yeah, we'll give him a new contract. But 20 years old, at that point, Premier League clubs are starting to make decisions about, does this lad have a future at the top level, or is it going to be, worth selling, make him a sellable asset? And even then, they might decide, we don't think he's going to be, the money we'll get from him is going to be massive, so we'll just let him go on a free transfer. It could be argued that, that's a bit of motivation for Luke Harris. We'll wait and see. But it's not exactly... I'm not enthused by his kind of record at Fulham in the youth ranks because, we've seen so many players look like, the best player on earth at the youth level, and then they can't hack it in men's football.
That's true. It wasn't a signing where I think where fans were excited. It was more of a we're a signing where you go, oh, nice. Not like last season where we brought in a Matos and we were like, Ed's the GOAT, he's done it again. It wasn't one of those. It wasn't very ones that I feel like they got the fan base very inspired.
Yeah. And it's worth mentioning, actually, speaking of Matos, Jerome Sale said on the Dub today that his name has not been spoken in the club in a couple of weeks. It seems that after, at the end of the campaign, when Matos made it clear that kind of he wanted to see kind of what offers might be on the table for him, that he kind of considered Oxford a second or third choice. As we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, Con, at some point Beggars might not be able to be choosers, and it was reported that Chelsea are close to selling him on a permanent basis, but it might not necessarily be to us. I've been told that Stoke and Charlton were linked, but that was at the back end of last week, so that very much might have that situation might have changed.
Yeah, it might do. I'll be honest. I don't foresee Alex Matos coming back to us on a permanent.
No,
it's a shame because there's a very tidy Championship player in there.
Absolutely, work right off the charts. The other two signings, the one that seemed to drag him for absolutely ever. Nick Prelec has arrived from Cagliari, initially on a loan with. Now, there's been conflicting reports of this. Now, from what I understand, it is still the case that it is a loan with an obligation to buy if Oxford remain in the Championship for a fee of around about £1 million. Obviously, Prelec spent the last 2 seasons out in the Austrian Bundesliga, and he put up some relatively okay numbers. If I'm right, last season he played 30 or 32 games and got 8 goals in the league, but also scored in Europe in the Conference League playoff. Obviously not outstanding numbers for that level. Obviously, the Austrian Bundesliga, it does have some good sides in it, but you would have thought maybe a couple more goals in that many appearances. I will say the types of goals he scored, there's a compilation that went around on socials. He's scoring some very, very tidy finishes. The kind of goals we were hoping that Harris, that Scarlett would have put away last campaign. Obviously, he's a bit of a unit. 6'2" is Prelec, and obviously adds a different dimension to our side. What are you thinking, Con, with this one? Because obviously, I did a bit of digging in terms of Nick Prelec, and obviously we had a lot of other links to strikers over the course of the season. To me, this seems like a bit of a, the other options kind of weren't keen, and Prelec obviously a little bit out of favour at Cagliari, but obviously there's a decent player in there.
Yeah, I think that I'll be very, very surprised if before the start of June or the end of May, if any Oxford fan had heard of Nick Prelec. I'll be absolutely honest. I think that when you're looking at his physicality and the way that he moves and plays the game, I can see why that maybe it's a bit of a Rowett signing, and maybe if he wants to play with two, we have a tall man up front and we have a small bloke, whether that be, or a smaller bloke, whether that be Harris or Lancashire, and they look to play off one another. And if this is the route that we're going to go down, but if I'm honest, I find it very hard to give an opinion on Prelec because don't really know much about him unless you've done digging. So either way, it's an exciting signing for the club because it's another player that's come from Europe. We've had players. We should throw caution to the wind, whether you want to do that or not. We've had players who were signed from Serie A before and turned out to be utterly useless. In terms of, was it Javan Anderson? So this is really just one where we're going to have to wait and see when he gets up to speed, which I don't think, by the sounds of it, doesn't sound like that it's going to be until September, mid-September. Am I right in that ballpark? Getting up to speed on pre-season, when to be honest, the rest of the squad seems to be getting up to speed with pre-season. So we're gonna have to hope for the best. But if we had a strike, if he can get anywhere near 10 goals this season, if he can get into double figures, then I think that will suit us very nicely. I think at the moment that might be a bit of a big ask if we're not really getting much from open play. But as I said earlier, this might just have to be, we'll have to wait and see what happens. But we're very kitted out now up front. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. I should also mention that Prelec can play in the wide areas, so there's a bit of versatility there for Slovenian. You mentioned the front line. We now have 4 strikers in the door, which I think leads a bit of weight to the speculation we might end up playing 2 up top for the majority of the season, because as we mentioned from the Portsmouth game, Will Lancashire signed from Spurs on loan. Another season, another Spurs loanee. Obviously, I was a big fan of Dane Scarlett when he was here. I don't think a lot of our fan base will agree on that. Obviously, didn't have an awful lot to do against Portsmouth. I thought he looked okay in the sense of kind of made himself a bit of a problem for defenders. But you know, like I say, it's very interesting that Rowett has brought on a 4th striker up top.
Yeah, I think that he put in a respectable game, like you say. It wasn't really outstanding. It wasn't horrible either. And you say he put himself about a lot. You could see that he liked to get out of man. But yeah, we're now at 4 strikers. So there's Lancashire, Harris, Bradshaw, and Odonka. As I said on the dub earlier, whether Odonka's going to go out or they're going to keep Bradshaw, because if we keep Odonka, that's technically an extra space that we can have. I think that within the few games that we have left during August, I wouldn't be surprised if Odonka is thrown on in a few more to see what he can do, and then determine what we'll do with him. However, I think that. Oh no, we also have Prelec as well. Do I make that 5?
And then if it's 6 if you add Leo Snowden and 7 with Louis Griffiths, so
Good lord! I guess then, yeah, if we're gonna have 2 strikers up top, I can see why we might be a bit overloaded in strikers. But I'm sure that a couple of those young boys will go out. But
I was going to say also,
Romane
can play as a shadow striker, so it might be 8.
Oh, bloomin' Nora, yeah, Romane can play there as well. But yeah, I think that with Lancashire, because when he was at West Brom, he came back, and although he came back with 11 games, 0 goals, he still came back in quite high esteem. Like, West Brom fans were quite respectful of the job that he did.
Yeah.
It was I believe that it was one of his first loans out there, and he is still he's only 20 years old and still is he even around that age, so still quite raw. I think that if he's seen what Dane Scarlett did, because like you, I was a fan of Dane Scarlett, and I thought that you could see that he was growing in the games that he was with us. So maybe that's what we're hoping that Lancashire can do. And I pray into the gods that there's another player in there that we can develop for Spurs. So it'd be quite interesting. It would be a completely different story, the game, if Lancashire goals stood. But it is what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. We mentioned the Gary Rowett interview. So Rout was asked after the game about kind of the transfer window still being open, what he's looking for. Rout's words that he's looking at a central midfielder and a centre back. Now centre back, we're guessing that means a left side centre half. Because at the minute the only left sided centre half we've got in the building is Kieran Brown, who's obviously injured. The centre mid is obviously that could be any. That could be he's looking for another 6, he's looking for an 8, he's looking for a 10. But obviously a lot. We're all calling as fans. We need a 10. We need another winger. Rowett obviously is vast championship experience, but are you a little concerned, Connor, about where it seems kind of the club's priorities appear to be in the transfer window? Where obviously as fans we've got a completely different take on what areas of the squad need improving.
What do you mean by that question? Like that the fans see where we need improving in one sense, and Rowett and the club see it in another.
In terms of, do you think centre back and centre mid is where we really need to strengthen? I mean, we chatted after Brody Spencer signed that we thought that was Oxford's defence sorted. Obviously there was a link today of Peter Kioso maybe off to Greece,
Right, yeah.
but for the most part, I certainly thought after we had that conversation that was going to be Oxford United's defence sorted, and it was going to be now we're looking at further forward. But Rowett still thinks there's improvements to be made in the centre half positions.
Okay, yeah, cool. Yeah, so did I. I thought that after Brody Spencer signing, that was it. That was the back line done. But when I've been thinking about those comments that he made, and I think upon reflection, he's probably right. Maybe something in the short term, because as you say, we need a left-sided centre half, and whether he's going to play a back 4 or whether he's going to play back 3, especially maybe even if we had a loan up until Christmas, because just Moore and Helik playing together, I think that it doesn't work. Let's be frank about it. It doesn't work. And last season, the saving grace that we had was a player called Ben Nelson, who, let's be frank, we're not going to get back, unfortunately.
No.
So, like, even if say Moore wasn't injured last season, and how we got that partnership going together, or even back trio, Moore still wasn't getting in there. And if we take Moore out now, say hypothetically, who are we going to put in, even a back 4 or a back 3? So I see where I was coming from. That maybe, yeah, even if it's a loan for the season, and we add more depth, because we know how much that, especially on the road, that Rowett likes to pride himself on being very, very, very hard to break down and defensively tight. And now going on to a midfield, yeah, I see why you'd say that you need another midfielder, because Harris is injured, and it looks like that is going to be for a while. And more strength and depth that we can have in midfield, whether it be a 10, an 8, or a 6. I would imagine it's either going to be an 8 or a 10, or one that can play across hybrid or anywhere down the centre of the spine of the midfield. I can see, because in those areas we're kind of low on numbers at the moment. So again, whether it would be a short-term loan or a long-term loan, but I can see where Rowett's coming from, and he played his hand. He dealt his cards on the table. He showed his hand to the board and effectively said, without saying it, give me the funds to go and get X, Y, and Z, because it's evidently clear, which I like from that, rather than saying, yeah, we might need to get it. Rowett saying, my job is to say that what we need, and he's saying it publicly. And I guess in some ways that's him covering his back in case the worst does go to worst. And
yeah. I completely understand that. Like you say, if it does appear that Rowett wants to play a back 3 at times this season, or even if it doesn't seem like he trusts Sam Long, and doesn't look like he, I doubt Stefan Negru would be kept around for the campaign. It's just, for me, it's I guess partly it's the kind of the exciting. If the 4 players, the ones you get excited about, the ones you kind of but when you're a kid, you imagine being on the pitches at school and that kind of thing. But I think I go back to how glaring our toothlessness up top is. And a real number 10 is what we need, I think, in that role. I think I said it to you after we signed Luke Harris. His signing to me seemed like it was that of a deadline day, late arrival, get bodies in the door kind of situation, not the first choice number 10. Obviously, real life football isn't Football Manager. So it's not so easy to go and sign a number 10. Targets get injured like Levi Smads has. He's now off the table because he's out for a significant number of time at Helenveen. But given, obviously, it's a long campaign to go and all that kind of stuff, but it is sooner or later, surely we need to, it will be kind of the number 10, obviously with the departure of Ruben Rodriguez, that will be kind of identified as this is an area we need to address sharpish.
Yeah, I'm still convinced that we blew it on Harvey Nibbs. So I'm absolutely convinced that there is a very solid Championship player in there, and whether it was the fee that scared us away, but I think that was the player. If Rodriguez was going to leave, which he did, in my mind anyway, that was the player that I was looking at anyway, thinking that he can do that absolute business at this level. But he's gone to Charleston, and it is what it is, and we are going to, as you say, it. And as I said earlier, if we had a proper number 10 in that role on Saturday, we might have looked a bit more vociferous, if that's the word, up front, and that was gumption. Had a bit more gumption about us, so we are.
Yeah.
A number 10 is going to have to come in fairly soon, and I do expect by the end of the window that we will bring in at least 2 more. But whether those will be exciting ones and ones that we need, we shall have to wait and see, Sam.
Yeah, definitely. I, for one, personally, I'm quite glad we didn't get Harvey Nibbs, because I don't want anyone that's played for that lot. That lot up the road, I don't want any of them anywhere near our football club. I know I had a conversation with one of my mates at the game, and he's kind of asked a question: would you like to nick one of their best players? But for me, it's on principle. If you wear that blue and white shirt, if you wear the red shirt up the A420, I don't want you anywhere near us. The likes of Billy Bowden, he redeemed himself. But no, for me, it'd be like Sam Smith, because I think Harvey Nibbs when we played him in the league, he was very much he very much got on side with the Ding supporters.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from an emotional point of view. I think Sam Smith is very different. I can't wait to welcome him back to the OX4. I hope he plays.
Welcome being in massive quotations. Obviously, we've got the biggest fixture of arguably the season is going to be on Wednesday at 4 p.m. Smudge between Colchester in the Cup and Hull on Sunday. We've got the Childers Council decision on the stadium. Obviously, this is huge. We've been building up for this for 2.5 years. And Con and I will be doing an emergency pod as soon as the news has been released of the results of that. I'm hoping it's going to be a very quick meeting. It'll be in and out. Yep, off you go, lads. Go and build your stadium. Obviously, with the situation that the likes of Morecambe are currently in and Sheffield Wednesday, obviously, we've been in that situation before with diabolical owners. We're back here again. I think it's like the 3rd or 4th time in our history that we've had stadium troubles. I think you get to see, especially with the likes of Morecambe, just how important a stadium is to the local community, to the local economy, and to the very lifeblood of the football club. Obviously buried before that. Like I said, we'll do an emergency podcast when that is announced. But just speak on for you how important kind of the stadium will be, because obviously there's been some talk of, if it gets rejected on Thursday, out to here is going to be sat in Indonesia going, I'm pumping all this money to this football club, and there's not a guaranteed home for the club for going beyond 2026.
Yeah, it's massive. If we don't have a stadium, it's quite simple. Then there will be no football club, and especially with the way that the deals works out now with our current landlord, that we can't stay in the stadium past 2027 if there isn't a stadium being built. So get to 2027, no stadium planned, no stadium being built, and that's it. Our tenancy is over, so we'll have nowhere to play.
Mm.
If we I'm not going to go to ifs and buts about what may happen and what the ramifications of each way will be, but just that people know that it's monumental. It's probably bigger. No, it's not probably. It is. Back in May, I would say May 15th, 2010. That was probably the biggest day in the club's history. It will be on Thursday, 14th of August. That will probably be the biggest day in the club history, determining what this club is going to be for either the next 3 years or the next 99 years. The council have the opportunity to, quite frankly, unleash a beast in Oxfordshire in terms of sports and in the surrounding areas, and the amount of economic growth that can come in the local area that can come from this stadium. I hope that everything's been considered and that there aren't, let's say, predominant NIMBYs in this area that will try and object to every little bit upon the way, that they don't find some magical species of tiny dust mites that are found. Let's just leave it at that. But yeah, on a serious note, it's a lot more than a stadium. It's a lot of people's livelihoods as well as their mental health and not their sense of being, but what's the word I'm looking for? Their routines throughout the year, because a lot of their routines depend around the Saturday and the Tuesday, and from local business as well. That comes from the stadium. So I'm sure that all Yellows fans across the world will have their ears very firmly on BBC Radio Oxford on Thursday from 4:00. I know my girlfriend's going to get sick and tired of it because that's all she's going to be listening to for all evening, baby.
I just wanted to touch on that before. I know it's been a bit of a long one today, but obviously, a lot to talk about from that Portsmouth game. But I just want to go back to something you mentioned. It is a sense of belonging. Fans before us, take it, their sons, their grandsons, their daughters, their granddaughters, walking up the beach on the London Road, now walking up Grenoble Road, as much as it is, the situation with the same has become a stain on our football club. It is a sense of belonging. I mean, you just need to go to any football fan, and a lot of Oxford fans, when the season finishes, we go the next weekend going, right, what do we do? Like I say, it's the routine. It's that, seeing people that you wouldn't see outside of the football. I mean, the amount of times leading up to Saturday that I was just out and about in Oxford and saw guys that I vaguely remember their face and went, hang on a minute, I saw you on this away day. It's a massive sense of community. It is the overused but very true comparison is that football stadiums are modern day cathedrals, modern day churches where thousands of people gather to all celebrate this one thing that we all have in common. And like I say, it's an incredibly important step for our football club. And I'm just pleading because I don't want to be in the same situation explaining to my kid in the future, this is the fourth time that our stadium's had this our club's had this issue with the stadium, and just having to all the incredible work that fans groups of our football club have done over the past 30 years to have a stable home. Let's not let that go to waste.
Yeah, I hope that it won't be in the application, but in the ears of councillors and the bodies that are going to be making this decision, if anybody has pointed, the bodies who will be making these decisions have pointed their ways to the likes of Bury, Morecambe, Reading, and it sounds almost extremist to say, but it is a real possibility that there could be a situation like that down the road. Even Coventry, say, when they had to play here, there, and everywhere, that might be a situation that we might find ourselves in, and how poor of a situation it was, and again how much of a toll it took, not only on supporters but also other people within the community who aren't necessarily directly connected to football, like the businesses around there that depend on 23 days, at least 23 days of the year. Because local, a lot of people don't see it or like to admit it, but a lot of towns, they're not just their football clubs, but their professional sporting clubs is what underpins their local economy. And I think that this with Oxford, all right, yeah, we have an economy through tourism because of the university, but we have something extra that we can give now, something that can inject the rapid growth of Oxford and Oxfordshire being this £100 million plus stadium.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we said, we will be back on Thursday for that emergency podcast. Please. Whatever God you pray to on the Thursday morning, just say a little prayer for Oxford United, because I'm not a religious man, but we need every bit of luck, every bit of positive thinking we can get to finally, fingers crossed, get this over the line. Thank you, Con, for joining us. We'll be back, like I said, on Thursday for that emergency podcast, and this time next week after the whole game. Please, just I can't believe I'm begging for a blooming draw at this point, mate. It's felt so deflated after that Portsmouth game. But anyway, thanks so much for watching Walking the London Road. We'll see you next time.